All right, I think I've got 104, and we're probably pretty close to the numbers that said who was coming. And now we just hit 105. So I think we'll start. We'll just try to keep on track. And my audio's coming through just fine, everyone?
Yep.
Okay, great. Cool. All right, well, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. I mean, really thank you for coming and giving your time this afternoon to the advisory group for our lake classification project. I know some others couldn't make it because of the time conflict or just as a whole, the ability to put the time into a group. So we do really want to give a shout out to everyone that's here for this afternoon and for saying that, yes, they could spend some time with us in developing this lake class system for Oneida County. So thank you so much for coming. What I want to first do is just do a couple of staff introductions and then we'll just kind of keep moving through that. We'll do an introduction to all the individuals that are here as well. So my name is Michelle Saduskas. I'm the Oneida County Conservationist. And the staff that are working with me on this project, Joanne Lund. Joanne, if you want to just maybe wave your hand there too. Yep, perfect. Joanne is our grant project manager, so she's leading up this particular project. So she's probably the most intimate, probably maybe even more intimate than I am with the project at this moment in time. I've got Bearbell Ehrig today here. She's going to be moderating. And so I'll let her kind of do some housekeeping and also some of the intros for who is here. I do want to, yep, I was just going to go to you, Steph. So last staff member that I have on board here who is going to be officially on the advisory committee as a staff member is Stephanie Boismanu, who is our AIS coordinator. So with that, I am going to say thank you for coming. It looks like a great day out there. And Bearbell, I'm going to hand it over to you, and then we'll just keep this moving along.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. This is really a good group to start this discussion. And first of all, I'd like to encourage you to, and many of you have your name and your name tag already, that if you're from a specific organization that you're representing, that might be really helpful to add to the name. And if anybody needs help with that, I think we're able to do that for people as well. If you need help with that, please put it in the chat, just your name and the organization you want added. Then we would like to invite you to, and we're going to go through everybody. We'll just call you one after another to introduce yourself and just say a few things, succinct and concise to who you are, where you're from, which organization you're representing, and maybe if there's anything that calls you to quickly say why you're here. And then we really want to get into the meat of things. Throughout the whole workshop, this is how we would like to approach this as an open discussion group and workshop. There is an invitation to actively participate, and you may, if you have something you would like to add or share to the ongoing discussion, you may either choose to raise your hand and be called, or just start talking as there's a brief pause in what's being shared. Or if you're more comfortable, you may also put something in the chat, and then I would be happy to contribute that as it works out. We know that some of you may be in situations where you're not able to talk or we're not able to write, depending on where you're zooming in from right now. So we want to have all communication avenues open for as much of an integrative discussion as possible. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting, Michelle or Joanne?
No, I think that's good. I know we tried to aim for a really diverse group today, from a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of different associations. So we hope we did good and getting a wide variety of opinions coming in here. So that's all I wanted to add in from my end. Thank you.
Good. Well then, we'll start with Chris Yamaya. And I'm sorry if I don't say everybody's name exactly the way it's supposed to say. I'm doing my best.
All right. This first time attending this, I'm working with Joe Pilarski on the Mid Lake Protection and Management District. So I'm just trying to catch up, new to the board, working with Joe's just starting this fall. So I'm just here to try and get up to speed and see if I can help.
Okay, thank you. Joe Pilarski.
Hi, I'm currently the chairperson of the Mid Lake Protection and Management District. So Chris is on the board with me as well, so he's here too. Yeah, that's the basics. I live in Woodruff, if that helps.
Thank you. Dan Butkus.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm treasurer for the Squash Lake Protection and Rehabilitation District, and I'm actually coming to you from my home in Waunakee, Wisconsin. That's about it.
Thank you. And we have Debbie Krumpek.
Yes, hi, my name is Debbie and I live on Lake Hasbrook. I'm part of the board there and I'm just very interested in these types of topics. I have a biology background. Hope to get to meet some of you guys.
Thank you, Debbie. Then we got Mike Engelson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Engelson. I'm the executive director of Wisconsin Lakes. We're the statewide nonprofit conservation organization and association of lake organizations from around Wisconsin. We have a long history actually of doing lake classification, though not me and not in quite some time, but very interested to see how this project unfolds.
Wonderful. And then we got Stephanie. Michelle already introduced you. Do you have anything you want to add? Good. Crystal Westphal.
I'm with the Let's Minocqua Visitors Bureau, representing Minocqua Woodruff Arborvitae and soon to be Hazelhurst in our tourism district up here. I also am the chair of the Oneida County Tourism Council and former Oneida County Conservation Congress delegate. So the reason I'm here is because Michelle asked me to, and also because we obviously, our tourism product is lakes, and it's our one of our main assets here for the Northwoods. So of course, I'm interested in helping in any way I can.
Wonderful. Jim Winkler.
Good afternoon. I serve on the Conservation UW Extension Committee, and I'm the chair of it. And then as part of that responsibility, I have 2 lake districts that I currently serve with. And one is being Mid Lake, and the other one is being Horsehead Lake. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Then we have Becky Gaskell.
Hi, everybody. I'm Becky Gaskill. Let's see. First of all, I'm a freelance outdoor and environmental writer. I've been doing that for about 10 years. I am on the board of Oneida County Lakes and Rivers Association. I also recently got nominated to Lumberjack RC&D. I am an associate director for the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation and the editor of their Wisconservation magazine. I became a master naturalist this year, and I fish a lot. So that's me.
Thank you, Becky. Tracy Beckman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tracy Beckman here from Lumberjack RC&D. Hi, Bear Bell. Lumberjack has 10 counties in Northeast Wisconsin, and we do conservation work. We work a lot with counties. I'm here because Michelle asked me, and I do almost everything Michelle asks me. But I'm happy to be here. I don't know a lot about lake classification, so I'm looking forward to learning more.
Wonderful, Tracy. Then we have Celeste Hawking.
Hi, I am the Natural Resource Director for the Lac du Flambeau Tribe. Previously, I was also the Water Resource Program Manager, Aquatic Ecologist for the tribe. And that's where my stem of interest in being in this group is.
Thank you for joining this group, Celeste. We have Pamela Toshner.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Pamela Toshner. I am the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources statewide water quality planner. And I also currently lead the Healthy Watersheds High Quality Waters effort, which is part of this project. And I am here to support the whole crew and especially Oneida County staff, because they are some of the first partners that are using this new statewide water resources protection program, the results of the modeling and assessment work, as well as the action plan. So huge kudos for being on the leading edge. I'm excited to see what comes out of it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Then we have Scott Van Agren.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Van Agren. I'm the DNR lake biologist for 6 counties, including Oneida County. Yeah, I'm like Pamela said, I'm kind of excited to see where this goes. I've never been a part of a lake classification effort with a county before, but I've worked for the DNR for quite a while and studied lakes. So I'm excited to be part of this effort.
Wonderful, Scott. Good to have you. Then we have Rob Jensen.
Yep. I'm Rob Jensen. I'm a member of the United County Board in the Land and Water Committee. I also am the County Board's appointee to the Squash Lake District and Crescent Lake District and serve as the Town of Crescent Chair. I'm looking forward to this meeting to learn more about what we're all about. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for being in the meeting. And I think that's everybody who's here right now. So yeah, I think we can move on to the introduction of the project.
Thanks, Berbel. I do want to just maybe catch up the group a little bit. I know we had a couple members that have said that they are interested. They are officially in the group, but could not make today. So I just want to kind of give a shout out to them. Carolyn Scholl, who is the Vilas County conservationist, will also be joining us when she can. We also have Sandy Evans, and she is with First Weber. So we wanted to bring that perspective in. I know Sandy did, we do have a comment from her. She sent via email. She couldn't attend the meeting today. And I know we also have Todd Trotsky from Oneida County Planning and Zoning. So they'll bring that perspective here when Todd is able to join in. And I'm just wanting to make sure I'm not missing anybody here. Dan Hess has also agreed. He is, I believe, the town chair of Newbold. Steph, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So Dan had said yes, he would like to be part of the group. So just not available today. And let's see, the other person, Norris Ross, representing Three Lakes Waterfront Association and also a member of OCLRA, Oneida County Lakes and Rivers Association, is also another member that could not be here today. So we'll certainly be entertaining comments from them moving forward. And let me just check my list here to make sure I'm not, Lynn Markham. Also was going to try to tap into us as much as she could. She's from the UWSP. I'm coming right now. Maybe somebody else can help me with her title. It's not coming to me right now. But Lynn Markham also is had said kindly that she can put in what time that she can do for our group here. And I think, oh, Tommy Ryden was another, and he is a committee member, Conservation Youth Extension Education Committee member. We hope to have him and his perspective from the water sport trade end of things as well. So those are some others that have said yes, they are on the committee. They just could not connect up today. So hopefully we'll hear some of their interjections throughout the next couple months or so. Okay, I do have just a couple of slides I want to show on the introduction of the project. I don't want to go into this too deeply, but I do want to just kind of catch everyone up that may not know a little bit about the project here. So let me just get this up. Sorry about that. Okay. Did you just confirm that it looks good with the first slide? The intro slide?
There you are.
Looks good.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, great. And I'll kind of keep this short and sweet, but I did want to, a few people on here already are pretty familiar with the project, and I just want to catch up everybody at one particular time. So this particular project is called the High Quality Waters Protection Project that we are working on. And I'm just going to kind of be slow in my talking because of the little bit of lag here, which may be a lot of lag right now. Okay. All right. So
next slide is there.
Next slide up. Okay. So if I'm delaying, I'm sorry, just trying to get you guys where I'm at. So I just want to do a little bit about how we got here with this particular project. Back in 2021, the DNR kicked off their Healthy Watersheds, High Quality Waters Initiative Action Plan. That is the abbreviation up top there. And so a project started forming in my head back along that time, maybe a little bit early 2022s, didn't know what that would look like. Then summer of 2022 was a 6-county lake meeting in Oneida County. And the topic of wake boats was on that workshop's agenda. And there was a lot of discussion, a lot of good discussion. And it happened to be our county board chair was at attendance at that particular meeting. And that was on a late, I think it was late in the week. The next week, he had come into my boss's office and had mentioned, hey, I was at this meeting. Is this something that Land and Water might be interested in looking at? Wasn't a request from him, but just, are you guys doing anything? Is this a topic that you might want to tackle or see what we can do at the county level? Obviously, we've been working with a lot of wake boat conversations, enhanced wake conversations from different angles as a department. So when that came through and came to me, it was like, I think now this is the other part of the grant. We can work on a project and try to develop something for a grant application and to try to get that awarded for us. So in 2022, I put in a DNR grant application. We were awarded the project, and that is our High Quality Waters Protection Project. Okay, how does, do we have a new slide up there?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
Do
right.
you want us to verbally confirm or just put a thumbs up?
Thumbs up looks great, Bearbell. I see you up there, so a thumbs up would be perfect. So just a quick little bit of look at the project. I call it a two-pronged project, a two-track project, whatever anybody wants to look at. We, on the one part, we're working toward the Healthy Watersheds and the High Quality Waters Action Plan. So we're starting to prioritize the healthy watersheds and the high quality lakes, river streams, and wetlands within them, within the county. So we're really looking at those healthy watersheds, high quality lakes, and putting our attention on those particular areas. That was the one prong part of the project. The other prong of the project, and that's what we're all here about here today, but in a sense, we're also working on the Healthy Watersheds initiative, but we're all here today talking about the lake classification end of the project. So where we are going to develop a lake classification system for Oneida County. And what we're looking at integrating the land and recreational use stressors. So we're not just looking at boats, we're looking at what's happening to shorelines, what type of stressors are we looking at, and those are going to protect our high quality waters. So that is what we're here today to work out, the lake classification part of the project. Just a quick rundown for the lake classification. We'll be assigning Oneida County lakes, and Joanne's got a number for you out there. She'll explain a little bit of that further along in today's meeting. So we'll look at assigning Oneida County lakes into management groups. The biggie, the bottom line here is that we want to create a list of protection activities for those lake classes. And that's the work that we'll be doing here today. And within the next couple of meetings here. Ultimately, the lake classification system will be worked into our 5-year land and water resource management plan. The work plans are 5-year. The land and water resource management plan are 10 years. So the ultimate piece is working this lake classification system into a working document that we'll be looking at for the next 5 to 10 years and onward. Thank you, Bearbell. And it's really hard to pause that long. And I'm not going to go into a lot of this right now. Joanne's going to go into much more detail, but I've already given a few presentations on this particular grant. And this slide came off of one of those presentations. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. How should we classify? We'll go into the many topics. And bottom line, we're looking at the vulnerability of our lakes. And putting them into those lake classification, those management categories. So that's a little bit about the project. And just a little bit of backdrop that we've got out here. That's a 2-year grant. So Joanne's been working on this since March. And she'll be at it through the rest of 2024 and 2025. And we'll see if we can wrap it up 2025. And I think that's what I have for right now. I think that's enough intro. If there's questions or we can take them wherever it may be, but I'll hand it over to Joanne unless there's a question or a comment.
Okay, I'm going to get my presentation up here. Okay, do we have any questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll just continue along. So Michelle said a lot of this already. You're here and we very much appreciate your help in creating and developing a lake classification system. This is the High Quality Waters Protection Project. And to get started, we reviewed what some other groups had done in the area of lakes classification. So I listed several here, different lakes groups, different counties. And I also did interviews with county conservationists in Burnett County, and Oconto County. And we ended up largely shaping our plan loosely according to the Burnett County plan. So considerations in lake classification, and what we're doing today is we want to come up with a list of the features of each lake that best assess the vulnerability of that lake. So things such as the surface area, the depth, shape of the lake, public access, things like that. And then in our next meeting, we want to create lake class categories and determine what these protection activities or management practices will be. So some of the limiting factors are data availability, although there's a lot of that available if we just know who to ask. We have data currently for 1,096 lakes in Oneida County. And then we also hope that the end result will be simple enough that it's easy for the public and lakes groups and anybody who wants to use it as a guideline to make use of. So to get started, these are not fixed in any way, but we developed a plan to intend it as a starting point in working out those features that best assess lake vulnerability. And the features we focused on we will talk more about today are the surface area of a lake, the maximum depth, the type of lake, such as seepage spring or drainage lake, and then some factors that represent the shape of the lake, which I'll go into more later. We want to decide on what kind of a feature to use there. We want to make use of the watershed rank that was developed as part of the Healthy Watersheds, High Quality Waters project. We also think it's important to look at the number of boat ramps because this is a measure of recreational pressure, whether or not a lake is included on the Healthy Lakes list, and whether or not it's included on it's considered a outstanding resource water or an exceptional resource water. And I'll go into those a little bit more as we get to them. So this is where we want to start discussion. So the first feature we thought was of importance was the size of the lake. Some of these are kind of obvious and others are less so. So looking at the data that I have, our lakes range from 0.03 to over 4,000 acres. Smaller lakes are more susceptible to environmental degradation, and also shoreline development has a greater impact on small lakes. So we were thinking of just as a starting point again, a tentative range for these. So we want to take that lake size and divide it up into ranges. So we were thinking less than 50 acres, that would include 889 lakes. And then a middle category, which is 139 lakes, and then greater than 250 would include 64 lakes. So we're wondering, we just want to open this up to discussion. Do we need more categories? Are these reasonable? What does the group think about this at this point?
Hey, Joanne?
Yes.
Before we get into too much, before we start discussion, could you maybe just explain the scorings, a little bit of like the scoring system, or like what these ranges mean?
Okay.
Like at the end, like could you just explain like that? Maybe that'll help everybody kind of hone in a little bit better.
Okay, you mean like the point system? Like,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if these were the categories or the ranges we decided upon, then for example, the lakes less than 50 acres would be assigned, say, they'd get 1 point. This middle group would get 2 points, and then the larger lakes would get 3 points. And then keeping in mind that a lower score means a lake is more vulnerable and needs maybe more protections. Is that what you were alluding to?
Yes, thank
you. So
you.
we need a way to sort of quantify or come up with a vulnerability score for each lake. So we would be looking at all these different attributes or features of a lake and then assigning scores based on where they fall in that, in that attribute, and then come up with a final score. And that's sort of getting ahead of ourselves here. So this final score, then we would, in subsequent meetings, we would look at categories to group these lakes into based on their vulnerability score. Does that make sense?
Sounded good to my end. I don't know that we would be not including lake size when we start categorizing lakes. I think we need to look at lake size, but I think that the question that we want to ask the group is, are we happy with these three ranges?
Yes.
I guess that's kind of the question that we kind of are asking the group.
Yes. And this is based on what other lakes groups have done. They seemed logical. So if anybody has any other comment, or otherwise we can go on to the next feature.
Joanne, this is Dan Butkus. I have a
Hi,
question.
Dan.
Hi. And this is just curiosity's sake. This is not to suggest I would want more categories. But do we know how many lakes are in Oneida County that are greater than 500 acres?
I do have that on my spreadsheet. I don't have it here in front of me.
A rough guess?
Well, there's only 64 greater than 250. So do you have an idea? It's, it's not many. Relatively speaking, as a percentage, it's not that.
And the reason why I ask is because the range is 0.03 to 4,200 acres, so, everything greater than 250 acres, that's 250 acres to 4,200 acres. So,
well, if you look at just these two categories, so this is like 1,000 lakes already, over 1,000. And I only have data for 1,096. So, there aren't very many in that size range. There's maybe I think there were 3 that were 1,500 acres or greater, because I was kind of looking at that from the wake boat perspective. So I think there are 3 that are greater than 1,500. I'm pretty sure that's accurate. And then there were like 3 more that were close to 1,500. So not many, 6 maybe.
Okay.
That's just a rough number.
Again, it's not that I want to increase the number of categories. I just want to be sure that most of them are somewhere between 250 and 1,000. That would make sense. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, good. And Becky, you had your hand up for a moment here.
Yeah, I just kind of was thinking the same thing along the line of wake boats, and if it's going to matter ultimately if this legislation does pass, what they put as far as like where they get to as far as acreage per lake that is going to be allowable for wake boats, or if we're not even going to think about that right now. That was my only question.
Yeah. Today we're trying not to focus on wake boats. But I mean, of course, it is a consideration. It's on everyone's mind, but we're trying to. That's kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little. So yeah, we're trying to just develop a system to classify the lakes that makes logical sense and that accurately assesses their vulnerability. So yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
But yes, it's on all of our minds, of course.
I have a question to Joanne.
Yes.
Because you said that this would be kind of been that you developed this with the idea from the Burnett County plan.
Yes.
And did they have a similar range?
This was exactly
acreage?
This was their exact range in this case.
And did they have a range of lakes that for the lake size that's up to 4,200 acres or something along those lines?
I didn't look at their lakes data, no. I don't know. I know what ours is. I don't know what theirs is. I mean, I could inquire and find out, but that I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. We ready to move on? We can always come back too. I mean, nothing's etched in stone if we move on. Okay, so yeah. Oh, I'm
Joanne,
sorry. Yes.
Before you do, could you
Yeah.
could you go back to the, I guess
Yeah.
just a quick question and just maybe an affirmation from other people in the group that are closer to the regulations and whatnot. We have like a large majority of our lakes sitting less than 50 acres.
Yes, we do.
I guess I was a little shocked at that. And maybe that's something I just wasn't aware of when you see it on here. And my understanding is right now, well, the 50 acre non-motorized. Is that for all lakes under 50 acres? Does someone know for those not being motorized?
It's only for ones that have a landing. So if there isn't public access, then that rule doesn't necessarily apply.
Okay, so but if there is, so if there is public access and it's less than 50 acres, it's non-motorized.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Okay, so just one more thing, hot off the presses, Stephanie just went and calculated or just got the information for us that there are 35 lakes over 500 acres in size in the county.
A bit more than I thought.
Maybe does that warrant another split then? Because that's half of what we've got over 250.
Yeah. Well, why don't we, should we just look into that, Michelle?
Yeah, I think that might be an interesting split.
Yeah.
Honestly, because as Becky said, that's half of the 250 split there. That might be something.
Okay, I'm gonna make, yeah.
And Mike has his hand up.
I was just going to ask too, because I was thinking, because of that factor that there's not going to be as much recreational pressure on lakes that are left less than 50 acres. Does that reduce the susceptibility to environmental degradation? And does that affect how we look at that range? I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, obviously, if it's small, other things are going to potentially affect it more, but
right. Yeah. I mean, we had talked about, I have some of the data I have is for springs, unnamed springs that are less than a foot deep. And we had talked about just dropping those off, possibly. We'll go with just named lakes. Just, yeah, Stephanie's suggesting named lakes, perhaps.
Or how about, do we know how many of those 889 have boat launches?
I haven't done that yet. You know, I have to go through the data sort of like lake by lake in order to figure out if the landings are developed or not, because that's kind of getting ahead of ourselves. But we had talked about not dealing with an undeveloped launch where it's a carry-in for a canoe or kayak. We were just gonna count those launches that were developed or paved. So I need to do that kind of on a one-by-one basis. So I have not done that. Until we decided how to score it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mike had his hand up and Becky has a hand up. So let's try to, and Joe has his hand up. Sorry. Just let's see, keep a little order so that everybody gets a chance to speak.
Okay.
Mike, your hands, are you done? You took your
I
hand
was
down.
done.
Okay,
Yep, I was
then
done.
Becky, please. Becky, please.
I just wanted to say, and I don't know if this fits here or not, but just so that everybody's aware, just being a tournament fisherman and being the tournament director, I can tell you that we do have a requirement of 50 acres per boat that we have in a tournament. So the bigger your lakes are, you're going to have a lot more tournament pressure. Just so you guys are aware of that. A lot more big bass boats running around.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's also another good aspect.
And that's a
Then we
development.
have Dan.
Let Joe go first, please.
Oh, okay. Just to answer the question from before, I think if we're doing a ranked system where we're giving each category points, excuse me, and you're basing the determination, the final determination on the total points, right?
Yes.
The other categories will make up for the fact that, say, the 50-acre lakes or under have less pressure because that shoreline development factor may be higher on those 50-acre lakes than it is on some other, right? So the hope I think that you're working for is that those other categories will not necessarily balance out, but you will see that change based on those other categories, right? Because you can still have a lot of houses on a 50-acre lake, but so even though the number for less than 50 acres means not a lot of pressure, maybe the shoreline development factor is very high. You know, if you're looking at, I'm just thinking southern lakes that I know, you know, around, I'm sorry, trying to think of, why can't I think of the town? Wisconsin Rapids, right? There's man-made lakes down there that the houses are literally on top of each other. That's one of the big lakes down there, right? So that shoreline development factor for that lake is going to be much bigger than it might be for any lakes up here. So just answering that question from before. So hopefully the categories will work that out. I think that's the hope that's kind of what you're hoping for. So that was my thought.
I would like to just say something quickly so that people can feel heard. The raising hand is actually an option that's in the reactions button on Zoom. And when you click that, then your picture will automatically come to the top of the list. When we do screen sharing, you can't see other people on the call. And so I'll do my best to scroll through people too, in case for whatever reason you can't access that button and are actually physically raising your hand. I just want to make sure that you understand that that we're doing our best to see you, and that might make it a little bit easier. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we'll go on to the next feature, and we can always come back if there's discussion and questions. So the next feature we thought was important to include is the maximum depth of each lake, because in shallow lakes, the lake bottom is more easily disturbed by water recreation and shoreline activity. And shallow lakes are more appropriate for passive, non-motorized sports. So they're more impacted by some of these things like nutrient load, effects on the plant community might be greater, spawning beds might need more protection. And I think for the sake of time, I'm just going to go to the next discussion slide. So when we're considering depth, our range for our lakes is from 1 to 95 feet. And the tentative ranges I have for to initiate our discussion is here. So we have less than 20 feet, which is 786 lakes. The middle 20 to 39 feet is 212 lakes, and greater than 40 foot in depth are 40 lakes. And then I'm a visual person, so I just graphed this out here. So this big area here is the lakes less than 20 feet deep. So the vast majority of our lakes are not very deep. And then then there's smaller numbers at greater depths. So again, we would perhaps assign 1 point for a lake less than 20 feet, 2 points for the middle category, and 3 for the lakes greater than 40 feet, or whatever we decide on. And again, a reminder, the lower score would be the lakes considered more vulnerable to outside stressors. And we must have some comments.
Anybody?
I see
Becky?
that, yeah.
I was just curious if we're looking at maximum depth. Do you think that's more important than like median depth or mean depth of the lake? Or I'm just curious.
Well, not really. The main problem with looking at mean depth is the data set that I have has mean depth for very few lakes. So the data is just not available.
Fair.
And then did you just, okay. But we initially thought about that and had some discussions on it. But of course, it's all, a lake's not like a exact geometric bowl with, it's varying depths all throughout. So we're just kind of trying to get some kind of a happy medium representation here.
Yep, that's a totally fair explanation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you.
Joanne, I have a question.
Yes,
so
terrible.
The range and the number of lakes, are these it seems like we're missing a few lakes from the 1096. Would these
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So let's see. Some of them, again, they were like unnamed springs that, they might have had a foot of depth, but there were some that have incomplete data. And so we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that too, eventually. But that's getting ahead of the game as well. But yes, it's not going to add up to the exact number.
Thank you. And we have Debbie.
Debbie?
Yes. I'm kind of in the same lane as Joe is talking about here. I mean, this is just an introduction. You're giving us some data. We need to start somewhere. I assume there's probably going to be some more correlation of data later on down the road. If we switch one thing and realize that, a particular amount of lakes don't fall in a certain category that we would like them to, then we'll probably go to another set of data, and maybe it's depth consideration that we go into 4 levels. So for right now, I would say that thank you very much for at least getting this type of data out, and it's giving us an idea of things to think about. That's kind of where I'm at here, that in the end, as Joe said, it probably most likely is going to balance itself out as you use your rubrics here for each of your categories. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dan, did you have your hand up?
Actually, Becky asked the question I was going to ask, and I don't have any comment other than, nope, I understand the explanation, and that's fine.
Thank you. Then Debbie, your hand is up again, or were you done with?
I know, done.
Okay, then we got Scott.
Scott,
yes. Like Debbie said, I think this is a good intro. I'm just going to point out that we're thinking about max depth here. Somebody brought up mean depth. And I can understand. It might depend on why you're trying to classify lakes overall, but one other piece of data that you could get on all these lakes is whether the DNR considers them deep or shallow lakes. And we base that definition, it's kind of, we called it lake type. And it's based on the size and the shape of a lake. So like a big lake that's 40 feet deep, but like doesn't stratify because it's so big, would be a shallow
Mhm.
lake still.
I see.
And a small lake that's maybe only 20 feet deep, but an acre might be a deep lake. So that's like an ecological definition. I'm not saying
Right.
you need to think about that at all or use that. I'm just putting that out there as when we get back to thinking about this, if that's another type of data you want, we could provide that.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful, Scott. That's helpful. How about Mike?
Sorry, just to kind of follow up on what Scott said, I'm wondering, do we know a reason that that they were classified in these at these 3 levels? Is there something about 20 feet that triggered it? Like, it seemed like maybe the 50 acres per size was because of that regulatory guidepost.
Well, one thing that 20 feet is often cited as a minimum depth for wake boat usage, even though we're not focusing on that today. And then, I mean, I've read other literature that went up to like 35 feet, but I think 20 feet is a kind of a general, minimum. But I guess we can alter any of these, and there may be very good reason to do so. Michelle.
I have a question, Joanne. Did you
Yes.
take down your presentation?
Can I take it down?
No, I'm not asking you to take it
Oh.
down. I'm not seeing it anymore. So
Oh,
I
am.
okay. I see your screen as you and Scott Van Agren.
The presentation is up yet.
Yep,
Maribel.
it's still there.
Okay, but
Okay.
it's not up for me, so I'm not sure what happened. I'll try to fix it.
Okay.
Do we want to consider any of the ones that are classified on the HWHQW list?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Michelle has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Maribel. Just a quick question, Joanne.
Yes.
I wasn't 100% sure. Did Burnett County use the 20 feet because of enhanced wakes? Or was that did you get that out of the?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you got that out of their literature or their background information, if 20 foot was chosen because of enhanced wakes. You kind of made mention of 20 feet being enhanced wakes, but was that Burnett County reasoning on that?
I think not, because their classification system predated wake boats pretty much, but it was what they used, and it seemed a logical starting point because of wake boats. Does that?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Because I think their system, they developed their system in, like 2006 or 2007, something like that.
Okay, and then we have Dan.
Well, we have 2 lakes biologists online, and I'm just going to throw something out on the depth. Wouldn't under 20 feet, the lake is less likely to experience turnover. Over 40 feet, it's more likely to experience turnover, and then you've got a mid-range where it could go either way. And so, to me, this range makes sense from a standpoint of, does a lake turn over twice a year?
I can just answer that if that's all right.
Is that Scott?
It is. I think, Dan, that's not a bad thought. And I guess if we want to base this solely on stratification, then I might suggest we use a different factor. But I guess that's why I didn't say earlier when I mentioned the deep and shallow lakes that we classify at DNR, that I said we need to use that. I wanted to put it out there for people to think about.
Uh-huh.
Because to get at whether they stratify or not, the way we classify lakes as shallow or deep in the DNR, there's a ratio of depth to acreage. And we could just use that ratio and come up with a set that stratifies for sure, a set that doesn't stratify for sure, and a set in the middle that probably stratifies and mixes sometimes in the summer. But if that's like completely what we want to base this kind of thought on for classification, we can definitely get you that information if you want it.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting and probably a good way to go. So we'll definitely be looking into that more.
Michelle?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the group feels. I guess I didn't think quite as strongly along the lines of stratification. And maybe Scott, I mean, should we be? I guess like I said, I honestly didn't think along those lines quite that strongly. And do we really need to go down that route?
Yeah, I think so. So we classify lakes by whether they stratify or not for our water quality standards in the state. So like we're comparing the same kind of lakes to each other. And that's really based on kind of what the nutrients should be like in the lake and the amount of algae. Now, the reason I didn't want to say we needed to do that necessarily is because if you perhaps are thinking about wake boat impacts, like really what might matter is just how deep the lake is as opposed to whether it stratifies or not, right?
Right.
And like maybe even Becky brought up, like I know we don't have mean depth, but mean depth, would be another good one there. So that's why I kind of started or prefaced that earlier by saying, depending on why we're coming up with this, if it's really a lot about wake operations, then you might just want to stick with a depth, because whether the lake stratifies throughout the lake or not, if that wake from those boats can hit the bottom and stir it up, it's going to do it, and it matters a little less about stratification in my mind. Does that make sense?
This is Rob, and I have a question.
Yeah.
Having lived on Squash Lake and on the Squash Lake District, depth can be an issue because that lake in some parts is maybe 70 feet deep. But then you get into many of the other bays and you're 20 feet deep. So when you go through the process, are you going to take into consideration, okay, just because 1/3 of the lake is 70 to 40 feet deep, but 2/3 is 20 to 25, how do we address that? And this is wake boats. This is a wake boat issue. So if you took the average, well, you could take that wake boat all the way through Squash Lake.
Right.
A lot of times you're running into a depth, from my understanding, that's not good.
Right.
So will we have that opportunity to take a look at the unique characteristics of every lake, depth-wise?
Okay. Yeah, those are some
I'm not-
important inputs.
Yeah. Ideally, that would be most helpful. I'm just not really sure how to get at that for the lion's share of the lakes, but we can certainly yeah. Oh,
I think
Stephanie's saying yes, she can help with that.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, but so it's on the list. And it's a good point. Very good point.
Then we have Joe.
Yeah, I think going along with what Scott was saying about the stratification, I think it's important to look at that, but it might be more important in a different category. So we've got we've got size, maximum depth, lake type, right? We could factor in whether it's a eutrophic lake, a mesotrophic lake, or a oligotrophic lake as that portion or include stratification in that. So we're maybe not singling out a very specific thing that might not make a huge difference, like Scott was saying,
Right.
in terms of this. right? Because if we're looking at maximum depth as a point of pressure, and then we're getting very particular saying, does it stratify or not stratify? It seems to be getting it more making it more complicated in that way.
Yeah.
So I think maybe including that stratification in a separate category, like lake type, and I think this was in one of the emails that someone who's maybe not here sent, so that's why I bring it up as well, is they mentioned lake type to be included as something that should be maybe looked at. I can't remember, I'm trying to remember the name who sent it. I think it was,
We
Dan
actually,
here? Maybe it was Dan, or is Dan here? I can't remember, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
We actually,
Yeah,
we
so,
actually are getting to that. You know, we've
okay.
only been through the
Yeah.
first two
Yeah.
features so
Yeah,
far.
maybe maybe that's a good point that
Yeah.
some of these things might resolve themselves as we see the other features.
Thank you.
And, you know, and then we can, yeah. So it's just, it's such a, it's a pretty big issue to try to tackle. So we're just trying to get everybody thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Can I just jump in real quick? I just
Yes.
popped a link in the chat, and I'm assuming or guessing that the Understanding Lake Data publication is how Burnett County came up with that depth originally.
What was it? Say it again.
It's called Understanding Lake Data, and it's old. Well, I shouldn't say old. It's still used today, but it explains the physical, chemical, and biological aspects of lakes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simplified, but they use
Yeah.
a 20-foot cutoff as a shallow lake definition.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to Scott's comments on
Yeah.
stratification and the new tools and ways to measure that, that is certainly an option. But I think the 20-foot simplification you have in here is legit as far as historical sort of science or information that's been out there.
Mm-hmm.
So you could even reference that potentially if you
Yeah.
stick with 20 feet in the document or the ordinance or your whatever you come up with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that background.
Yeah, thank you, Pamela.
Okay, so I'm going to move on because like I said, we can always come back. So then another feature we thought was important to consider was the lake type or the flush potential. We were thinking of 3 categories, the seepage lake, which is landlocked and has no external drainage. An example of this in Oneida County is Boulder Lake. Drainage lakes and impoundments that are connected to the surface water system. And so there is a certain amount of flush happening, such as willow flowage and many others. And then the spring-fed lakes are sort of an intermediate, where they're fed primarily by natural springs. So we were thinking along these lines to divide lakes into these categories. And thoughts, please? Anyone have a thought on that? No?
Dan has his hand up.
Oh, okay, okay.
Oh, no, I just was thumbs up. I was
Oh,
giving
all
her.
right, all right, all right.
I think that's good to.
It's perfectly great. It sounds good to me. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Me too.
okay.
Scott Van
Right.
Nagren has his hand up.
I think you could use this, and there's a way to maybe do a little better than this with our more recent lake classification, the way the DNR does it. But
Okay.
you know, in Wisconsin, like we would separate drainage lakes from impoundments.
Yes. We talked
and
about that, yeah.
Yeah, and we kind of got rid of spring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you could go either way. Instead of spring, we tend to classify drainage lakes into lowland and headwater. So
Oh,
it's based on the size of the watershed. So like a headwater lake would be a lake that has at least an outlet, but its watershed is less than 4 square miles. So the land draining to it isn't very large. So it's kind of at the top of a hill in a watershed, but water is coming out of it. And then we
Mhm.
have lowland drainage lake, which is a lake that could have just an outlet coming out of it, or an inlet coming in and an outlet going out. And its watershed is rather large upstream, so there's a lot of
Mhm.
land draining to it. So you might even think
Okay.
about Lake Tomahawk, even
Mhm.
though it's kind of in the headwaters, the amount of land draining to it, because it's such a big lake, is a higher area. So then they call it a lowland drainage lake. Anyway, it's just another system. You probably add 2 more categories here.
Mhm.
Or alternatively, you could go with this one, which was like the older way, DNR classified hydrology. And
Mhm.
this is just based on primarily where the water in the lake is coming from.
Yeah, right. Well, I like what you said because it's not so much of an oversimplification and reflects reality much more. So I like that idea personally. Does anybody else have comment on that or on the feature in general?
Michelle?
Yeah, I do like what Scott mentioned. We did discuss the drainage, if we're looking at of one of our flowage systems. So
Mhm.
I do like that brought out a little bit, and maybe if the group doesn't object, we could go to the little bit broader breakdown that the DNR has now. I mean, if we've
Mhm.
got a newer, updated breakdown of lakes, let's use it. I would
Yeah.
kind of tend toward.
Mhm.
If we can get that, Scott, that breakdown.
Yeah, we call it natural community. So it's a combination of the hydrology, that's part of the natural community, and then it's whether it's shallow or deep. So like we could get you a list that would say shallow headwater drainage, shallow lowland drainage. It would classify all of
Mhm.
them on the 2
Uh-huh.
factors
Okay.
together of whether they're deep or shallow, and then what type of hydrology they have.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sure I can get that for you.
That would be great.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds really good. We have Joe.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna be looking at a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, you need to go with the best available data. That's the
Right.
newest way to do it, right? So doing it the way like you were just talking about, I think I agree with Scott and you as well, that using that newest way that they're classifying is going to give you the longevity for whatever you're going to use this for in the future, or whoever is going to use it in the future. Because
Mhm.
if they're looking at DNR data, they're going to say, well, what's a drainage lake, or what's a drainage lake, excuse me, or a seepage lake is not going to be in there. So it might not be as useful in the future if you're
Right.
using those outdated terms. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
And then we have Jim Winkler.
Yeah, just a comment, and I agree with the discussion that's happened so far. I'm just curious, of the 10,096 lakes that you've already have identified as far as having data, have you gotten that broken down by lake type at all?
I haven't worked with the data because, I didn't want to put a lot of time into it until we decided, today and in the days to come what we wanted to do. So I have the data and it's a column in the data. But no, I haven't worked with it.
And is the data reflecting what DNR is talking about as far as types of lake types?
Like what Scott just said?
Scott, yeah. But,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, yeah.
no, we don't have that, but he indicated he could get us that data.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's not in my current data set.
All right, well, Debbie.
Yes, did you mention, in terms of using updated data, did you mention that the Burnett County's, system was made in 2006?
Yeah, it's somewhere 2006, 2007, something like that.
Is there any other counties out there that have a more updated system in place that we could look at how they created their product?
There are, but a lot of them focused on zoning ordinances. And so it didn't seem as applicable, which is why we chose the Burnett County one as just a loose model. But yes, there's a lot of information out there. Our focus is not zoning ordinance, but these protection activities in the end to protect our vulnerable lakes. So, but yeah, we can look at others again or revisit others. Yeah, we had to start somewhere.
Right. Do you have a list going of those counties that are more up to date, even though it's based on zoning, that we could have a copy of? I would love to see that and just kind of dig around.
Well, it was my first slide, but I didn't have the dates of when those their systems were developed.
Okay,
but,
thank you.
but
I do have that, and thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, are we ready to go on for now?
Yeah.
Looks like we don't have any hands up right now.
Okay, so this one's a little bit more complicated. Oh, why is it?
Michelle has something to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to just say one thing with the comment, the discussion that just happened. I know we had looked at a lot of different plans, and some of them didn't put us as far as the material that we needed. So there may be some updated ones out there, but they didn't seem to fit us as well. We did converse and look at other plans, Debbie, that were in there. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, I'm not sure, I'll just read a comment here. Tracy Beckman just put a comment in the chat, and I think I'll let Scott answer this one, but she had said, I'm sorry if I missed the answer to this, but if the WDNR already has a lake classification system, why is it in our best interest to do it a different way? And I have a thought, but I think the lake classification, I think, was at a different scale. Scott, I'm just not sure if you can help me out on that, Scott, or.
Yeah, our lake classification, I mean, there are many ways you can classify lakes, and ours was written explicitly for how we assess nutrients and algae in a lake. So I mean, I think there are many reasons you could classify a lake, and I think going through all these factors and thinking about whether they're important for the reasons that people in Oneida County want to classify lakes and what that might mean for the tools that help you protect different kinds of lakes is important. I think if we just went with the way DNR classifies the water quality in lakes, that might not be getting at everything that you want to consider. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, the next feature we wanted to discuss is the shape of a lake. We want to come up with some way, a fairly simple, direct way to describe the irregularity of the shoreline of a lake. For example, I have these two down here. This is Lake Killarney. If you consider the shoreline length, because it's such a convoluted shape, it's got a really long shoreline length compared to Shepherd Lake here, which is a fairly regular shoreline. So that'll have a shorter shoreline length, but of course it all depends on surface area as well. So in my research, why did that keeps moving on me? In my research, I came across two different ways to do it. There's this shoreline development factor, which I think is maybe a little bit antiquated now. And that was really a way to measure how the shoreline of a lake deviates from a circle. So I don't know if we need to get into the calculation of it. But there are some criticisms of this, this mathematical factor. And those are that if you measure the shoreline length from maps that are different scales, it's not really, it introduces a bias, and it's not really comparable. And then also another thing I read was that it's really only legitimate in lakes with a similar surface area. So then I ran into another factor, which is a simpler, it's shoreline density, where you just measure the shoreline length and divide it by the surface area. And I guess for this assessment of lake shape, I would really appreciate a lot of input, especially from people who do this more as for a living. But we want some way to assess this, the idea of lake shape, because the shoreline length will have you know, a lot of impacts on the lake vulnerability and the potential for development.
Dan has his hand up.
Yes, Dan.
Well, in preparation for this, because this has been vexing our lake, Squash Lake, for a while. How do we look at this? And I chose our lake, which is a highly convoluted shoreline. We have 7.1 miles of shore and only 397 acres. And if you look at how far away from a perfect circle that lake is, it ranks 6.5 away, you know, as a factor. If you look at Pelican Lake, it ranks as a 3.8, and a perfect circle would be 1. So then I looked at ratio of acres to miles of shoreline, and Squash Lake has 56 acres per mile of shoreline, and Pelican Lake has 217.5 acres per shoreline. So I tend to prefer, I mean, just to understand density of development per acre of open water, what you have on the right hand side is the one I would go with.
Anyone else?
Michelle has a hand up.
Yeah, after Joanne brought us the second one, just the shoreline density, just the simpler formula there with shoreline length and lake surface, I was leaning toward that one, but we wanted to throw it out there to the group if anybody had some experience with the shoreline development factor. We'd certainly take a better look at that by all means.
Anybody else? Or are we ready to move on to the next one?
Okay, we can always come back to it because it's kind of a big topic. So then we wanted to consider, we thought it was a good idea to consider the watershed eco rank, and this is based on the Healthy Watersheds High Quality Waters program. So in Oneida County, this is a map of Oneida County, and I just have the higher ranked watersheds numbered, but we have, I think it's 48 watersheds of this size in the county. And there are a lot of different factors considered in ranking them. And we have people in the audience who are much better at addressing questions about that than I am. But we do have a number 1 ranked watershed. We have some really high quality watersheds. And I'm just gonna go to the next slide because what I did was I took those 48 watersheds and I just did a histogram with Excel, and it grouped them into these 4 groups using its algorithm. Is somebody? Where you now have massive numbers. Anyway, okay, I think that was in
somebody's background.
Yeah. So Excel's algorithm just put them into these 4 categories. So it seemed somewhat reasonable. There would be 21 in the highest ranked watershed group. And those would be the most vulnerable. 16 in the next group, 5 in this group, and 6 in this group. And this is a bar graph of all the watersheds of this size. Again, it's just showing the same data as here. But just to give you a visual, something visual to think about in sorting through these watersheds. But I mean, I guess I like using the watershed eco ranks because it really combines so many factors into one attribute or one feature. So these are the watersheds. I don't know if I made this clear. These are the watersheds that wherein each lake is located. And a watershed is a drainage area. So, you know, it can be kind of confusing, but I think we have enough background here that we probably have a idea of what that is. Scott.
It might be worth, I like what you did here. I mean, I don't have a better way to split this up necessarily, but it might be nice to know how many lakes are in each of the groupings, and we can.
I do have that in my data, but I didn't have it here. Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
so you're not like have like one category that has like all the lakes.
Well, actually, I do have. Don't. Oh no, that's the number of watersheds. Okay,
Right,
never mind. Yeah. So number lakes in each group. Take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Okay, are we ready to move on to the next one, or anybody else on this one?
Okay, we can always come back. So I'm gonna move ahead. So we talked about the number of boat ramps on a lake as a measure of recreational pressure. Stephanie came up with 207 boat landings in the county, okay, total. And we had also talked about only considering those boat ramps that are more developed, because there would be, you know, watercraft that make a bigger impact on a lake. So, you know, we were going to have maybe rough categories of like 0, 1, and more than 1, or something like that. Thoughts on?
Well, I think that you're going to have the carry-in landings in those smaller lakes.
Yeah,
only.
but we weren't going to really deal.
No,
Yeah.
so you're going to want to scratch that
Right.
category.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are we looking at boat ramps that are for motor boats, or because there are also boat ramps that would be not necessarily carrying, but be on a non-motorized lake?
Yes. Well, that's a good question, because there are some that do fall into that category. Just a few, just a handful of them. But for the most part, the boat landings in that list of 200 and some are develop to some point, whether they have a concrete ramp or sand gravel ramp. I don't know if we want to break it down by that. And parking spaces and that type of thing. And those are all factors we can take into consideration too, or do we not want to? The other factor we could take in when we're looking at the boat ramps is the watercraft inspection data. You know, how many boats are coming in and out of these landings per year, and where are they coming from? And how many people are we reaching out to at each one of these landings? How many of these boats have been in a different water body in the last 5 days?
I didn't know we had that, but of course you would, yeah. Well, that could be something we do want to include. Yes.
Becky?
Yeah, I would say it would be good to know like what we're talking about as far as improved, like myself, now that I have a 20-foot bass boat, there's certain landings that people would consider to be improved that I wouldn't launch my boat on because it would be impossible for me to do. Not impossible, but unlikely for me to do successfully. So I don't know if we what exactly the criteria are for improved and how that makes a difference, I guess.
Right. That's what I was wondering too. Are you considering, Becky, whether it's like gravel or concrete planks?
Yeah, that could be one consideration. I mean, if it's gravel and nice gravel, that's fine. But if it's, you know, something where you can't get a bigger boat in, like when you and I did the, I don't know if you remember that, but when we did the Mons Lake landing that one time for Snapshot Day, that's hard to get a bigger boat in, but it is an improved landing. So
correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, maybe we can work with you on that since you have all that data that would,
Then we have
he's here in the office, so so it's convenient. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are we ready to go to the next raised hand?
Yes.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, something hopefully doesn't complicate too much, but it might be a very specific example. But on Mid Lake, we are connected to the chain, right? So we have Minocqua, Tomahawk, Kawagusaga. And we might not have an improved boat landing. In fact, I think if Stephanie's still in the room, she was at our landing this summer. It's a very small landing and it's just rocks and it's impossible to get anything but a canoe in there. However, we have a lot of pressure from the rest of the lakes around us because we're connected by the channel to all of them. So I don't know if that factors in any way or if it should factor in any way, but just something to consider. Thank you.
I think that's a great point, and it's something that I personally hadn't considered, but it very much affects your lake. So I think we need to work that in somehow.
Yeah, and I think like likewise, Tomahawk and Minocqua are not connected by boat landings, right? But the traffic on Minocqua affects Tomahawk, and the traffic on Tomahawk affects Minocqua. So it's not just for our small lake that. You know, it's for all the lakes on our chain and likewise on other chains as well, may factor in. So,
Waterfront Association is another example.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I think that we need to work on that.
Say, Joanne.
Yes.
This is Jim again.
Hi, Jim.
On this topic, do you have in your data the number of lakes that are linked by other lakes and channels versus those that are just singular in and out, no connection with any other lake? Do you have that kind of data available?
I do not have that in the data set that I am currently working with. Do you have something?
I don't have something that specific, but I think we can come up with that.
Yeah, I think we need to come up with that.
I think we need to come up with that. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
That sounds good. Then we have Michelle.
Yeah, just a couple of observations here. Joe, thank you for that comment because I didn't even go that way either. So I think that's a really valid point about looking at how that particular lake is interconnected with nearby lakes, and maybe that can easily be, you know, when we're looking at each lake, maybe it just gets bumped up or another point. I think that might be an easy thing to find out or look at visually when we're going through those lakes. So I think that's really important. Not with CBCW data, I'm a little bit nervous about going down that rabbit hole. Personally, I think that, I mean, I was already getting a little bit nervous about how much do we complicate the type of boat ramp. And if we're starting to look at data sets of what has numbers and how many people are inspecting and numbers, that just, I just feel that might not be the best rabbit hole to go down. You know, Becky had a really good point too with the development. I don't know how that easily classes out. Yeah, it's improved, but we can't get a certain size boat down and into it. I don't know. Are those really hard questions that we can flesh out easy enough? That gets me a little worried on some of that. Valid points, but I just don't know that we have that data available and easy enough to grasp on some of those.
Well, I think too, that might, like you said, it's almost too much information that is probably not going to be pertinent to the formula that we're coming up with.
Okay.
Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably opening up then like about 10 more rabbits. They're breeding.
Cans of
make more
worms.
holes, because it just seems to me like this is, if we're going to base some of this on recreational pressure, there could be like, you almost have to look at traffic on the ramps. Just because there's a lake with 3 ramps, or just because there's a lake with 1 ramp, doesn't mean that ramp doesn't have a lot of traffic coming in and out. And so with the like very big caveat that we probably don't have the data, so maybe it's not something that's able to be handled within this project, but what's actually happening on the water seems like from a recreational pressure standpoint would be an important way to factor it in. So it depends on how many boats are stored on the shore too. You know, what are the recreational pressures that really are happening on the water? And I'm not sure that just how many ramps gets to that.
On that note, I think it's really interesting to see what people bring up as what data might be interesting to integrate. And those are things that can be taken note of. And even if it doesn't fit for this specific project, but just the fact that it's noted somewhere with the variables that were considered, that may be of help to another county who may either has that data for themselves or who sees options to integrate that data. So basically just mentioning the variables somewhere in some sort of report that we put out is going to help somebody.
Yeah, I think we'll be taking a much deeper look into this one.
Okay, then we have Debbie.
Yes, we talked about AIS control more recently, about lake capacity. Like you said, there's a lot of different variables out there. And I think some of these types of things, maybe we put in our back pocket, maybe look back at them and use them maybe as protective type of activities or other types of data that would help lakes and guide lakes to be better lakes. But to use this type of data for this particular tool, I wonder about it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Debbie. Anybody else on this point, or are we ready to move on? Michelle.
Debbie, so are you thinking that we should not have number of boat ramps, just not capture that data, just capture it in a protection activity?
No, I think boat ramps definitely part of your tool, but other types of things that there's so much data out there, and other lakes may not have this data, such as plant health, fish health, the amount of spiny fleas, lake capacity, that type of thing.
And we may be getting to that in a kind of a general way in the next two features. We possibly might. You'll let me know.
Okay, but then let's move on.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one, we thought it could be important to rank or score lakes on whether or not they were included on the Healthy Lakes list. And I think this one, you know, I'm not intimately familiar with it, but I think this one takes a lot of factors into consideration for inclusion on the list, and maybe some of the things we were just discussing. And there are other members of the audience who probably know a lot more about this than I do, but that's my general feeling, is this could be sort of a good way to include a lot of different factors.
Yeah, I can just quick summarize the data sets that went into this.
Okay.
Basically a lake or stream needed to, well, you don't have streams on here, I guess. Oh yeah, you do.
No.
But if you were to use streams, I see a creek there, but
well, this, yeah, that's just for visual. It's not
okay.
The data we would use. Yes.
Okay. It needed to hit 2 of 3 criteria. So it needed to be a unique or rare resource. And examples of that would be like wild rice waters, lakes with cold water fisheries, like Cisco. I'm spacing on some of the other ones. And then the second category is it needed to meet water quality standards. And that goes back to what Scott Van Egren was explaining earlier, the water quality assessment work we do, we report back to Congress on. And then the third criteria is it needs to have good or excellent biotic integrity. And the way we measure that is with an aquatic plant point intercept survey. So if a lake had 2 of 3 of those things that would make this list, the kind of the drawback of it, the list partly is if a lake doesn't have enough monitoring data, it could very well be a high quality water, but we may not know it because the data haven't been collected.
Right.
And then I'll mention actually that first category of unique or rare resource already includes outstanding resource waters, which is on your next slide.
Oh, okay.
So it might be a little, yeah.
Well, no, we don't want to do both, probably. Yeah.
Well, there might be you might want to cross-reference and see what outstanding resource waters are in Oneida County that are not on this list, because it had to be more than just an outstanding resource water. But this list is definitely more robust.
This one we're looking at now.
Yeah, than just the ORWs.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
But these would be like the best of the best. And if it scores a 3 in that last column, it's like scores as high as it possibly can across all those 3 criteria I described.
Okay, I see. Yeah, in the last, yeah, okay. So then should I go on, because maybe there's some redundance then in this, there apparently is, inclusion as a outstanding resource water or an exceptional resource water. So we need to cross-reference somehow, or maybe we should even use that, something with this last column based on how many points it hits, or, but of course this is a small subset of all the lakes in the county. So I feel like we could use more input from people who work with these, work to develop them.
To develop the list, you mean, or the people?
Yeah. Well, both of them, you know.
Okay.
I mean, what makes sense? You know, I don't have a good enough grasp at how these were developed and what isn't included in order to come up with some logical way.
I think it makes sense to use this list and then identify the lakes that are scored like 1s, but could be 2s for future monitoring, whether DNR does it or the county does it, and be sort of take an adaptive approach that you might add more water bodies down the road.
And this is an old list too. We need to get a more updated list, which are you coming out with in like about now, or?
No, we won't update the list for, it'll be 2 years before it's updated again. We skipped the current cycle because the program's new enough and we're just trying to get it off the ground, but we'll do it again, and there should be a new list in 2025, I guess.
Okay, so we would use this list. Okay.
So this, Pamela, this list was generated in 2023?
No, it says 2021.
Oh, okay, I can't see
2021.
that. Oh, okay, so it would be another 2 years. And Michelle has her hand up.
Yeah, I guess my question is, we'll definitely cross-reference to make sure we're not missing something there, but and this probably is to the greater group, but certainly Pamela, we were just looking like a yes, no on the inclusion on this healthy list. Should we break it down a bit more? I thank you for the breakdown on that it has to hit 2 or 3. Do you think we should break it down a bit more if it hits the 2 or 3, or is it just, okay, yeah, it hits this list, it's good enough?
I think the last thing you said. I think if it's on the high quality water list, it made the cut.
Okay. So on or off list. Okay, that's what we had been thinking. Okay, thank you for that input.
And I guess the question, so I'm kind of the, I don't know, the technical person on this, but I'm curious if the individuals who live on some of these lakes and in Oneida County generally agree that these would be the high quality waters.
Well, one thing that I see is that on the slide, and I'm not sure, maybe it's different for other people, but I can barely read the names.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not sure that it's really good, like that it's good to discuss of what we see on the screen, or if we need to look at that with a better perspective.
We're happy to send it around. We'll send it out to the group to take a look, see at, certainly on there. So I know we just kind of threw it there just as a point of discussion, maybe not to look at each name, but sorry we didn't have it prepped a little bit bigger, but we'll get that out to the group.
And Dan has his hand up.
As somebody who has property on a lake that is on the list, whether it's on the list or not, I think it's good to note that there are lakes that have these designations, and whether they have one or all 3 designations I don't think it really matters. It just means that these lakes are exceptional, outstanding, whatever word you want to use, as water quality. And I think that those kinds of waters are worth protecting. And so I would, I go along with what Pamela said. I would, again, being somebody who has property on a lake that is on the list, I agree with the breakdown. That doesn't mean that everybody else's lakes are not, and should not be protected. But I think these are the ones that are more highly sensitive to stressors.
Yes, I concur.
Scott has his hand up.
Well, I mean, I kind of agree with everything that's been said. I guess one other way to use this list that might spur on some action in Oneida County, and And I'm wondering if I could ask our central office, maybe it's you now, Pamela, I don't know. But if we could find a list of lakes that haven't been assessed, so meaning they're not on the list because we don't know whether they're healthy or not, like that would be valuable to the county, I think, because then lakes might want to do some water quality data collection or join Citizen Lake Monitoring Network to collect the data to know whether their lake's healthy. And I think that could be another list. It would be used in a different way, but that would be a nice list to have, as well as recognizing all the lakes that we already know are healthy.
So Scott, this is Dan. I just, for clarification, would it be a three-way response? Assessed, it's on the list. Assessed, it's not on the list, and not assessed.
Yep. That's kind of what I was thinking, but I didn't know if I wanted to call out the lakes that aren't healthy necessarily, but that would be one way to do it, Dan. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that they're not healthy. I just,
Right.
as Pamela pointed out, there are certain criteria that they're still healthy. They just did not meet that particular criteria to be put on this particular.
Yeah, right. It's all relative. Okay, so I guess I don't really understand now how the outstanding resource water fits in with the high quality waters list. Is it a subset, or is this a redundancy?
It's a potential redundancy. My guess is there might be a couple lakes that are on the ORW list that are not on the high quality waters list.
I see. Okay.
And but we considered if it was an ORW, it got a point. So out of that having to get 2 points out of a possible 3, some lakes might have only got the ORW point and not necessarily the other points, either because they're impaired or they don't have a point intercept survey. We could, if we cross-references that, I think it'll only be a few lakes and we'd be able to tell you why they're not on the high quality waters list. I would put my eggs in the high quality waters basket though.
Okay, you did say that, yeah. And what about exceptional resource waters? Should we have that anywhere in the
That usually is streams or rivers.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay. Okay. I see. So probably scratch that.
Here we have something here in the chat from Celeste. How is the group going to consider tribal exceptional resource waters / outstanding resource waters? Especially if that differs from the WDNR's classification. It's a really good question.
Yeah.
Michelle?
I think Celeste, could you give us that listing or point us to where that information is located at? We could certainly kind of see how that matches up, how it integrates in there, and we don't want to lose track of that. And that might just work out, it might just be a really easy thing for us to incorporate into the classification system. So that's certainly something we want to look at, we want to consider, and have a discussion about that. So if we could get that list or be pointed to that information, that would be great.
And this one's only going to be pretty pertaining to the lakes within the reservation, and within the Oneida County portion of our res, it's like a little part of Crescent Lake, which is listed as tribal exceptional resource waters as per our water quality, our EPA approved water quality standards. That can be found on EPA's website.
Okay, so Crescent Lake is would that be the only one there, Celeste?
Lake. But also the Tomahawk River is also an exceptional water resource. That's a lake. Or that's a river, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so that needs to be taken into
Yes, it does.
consideration.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and
Crescent Lake is on the high quality waters list, just to clarify.
Good.
Is there more than one Crescent Lake?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder, are they the same? The one down by Highway 8 and the one that's
No,
on
it's a different one,
LDF?
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, yeah. Is that
Okay,
a new?
Dan,
Yeah.
Celeste put the website in the chat.
Oh, great. Thank you, Celeste.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I would support including the tribal designation as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see no hands up, so I'm gonna go on. Just kind of in a way, in the way of wrapping it up. Opening it up to other ideas. We had a couple of advisory group members email in, one suggesting we consider water level fluctuations. I guess this would be annual. It might be included in some of these other things we've already, in a bigger assessment. And then I don't know, Dan, do you want to talk about your comments here since you're with us?
Sure, and let me talk. I'll talk about Sandy Evans' comment about water fluctuation as well.
Okay.
I mean, not that she asked me to, but water level is something not the district, but our lake association is doing. It's a long-term, obviously, project. It's going to be forever. Looking at the fluctuation of water level, we are considered a deep seepage lake. Even though we have an intermittent stream that flows from Washburn Lake into Squash Lake during periods of heavy rain. So that does for us that the water level fluctuation, and I'll echo what Sandy said, does have an impact on both recreation on our lake as well as it seems to have an impact on our aquatic invasive species and our native species plants. So that may be a factor, but not every lake, in fact, very few lakes measure water level fluctuation. We just started this year. So that may be, I don't know if that's something that you want to consider, given that not every lake does it. But my comment on the plant community assessment, this is something that we get from our lake management plan and from our every 3 years we do a point intercept. So we get Floristic Quality Index, Simpson's Diversity Index. We know that we have 3 plants that are of special concern and one that is rare in our lake. It's rare only because it's normally found in cold water streams, not in cold water lakes. And those indices have to do with susceptibility to stress. Are they susceptible to pollution, to the turbidity of water, to other factors? The fact that we have 68 different native species puts us in the top quartile in the state. So, and then as Joe pointed out, and this is only because I thought I might not be able to make this meeting. The lake's trophic state, and whether or not you have known invasive species, may be useful as well. It would consider that maybe an existing stressor on the lake. I'm not married to these. It was just something that came to my mind.
And I guess my thought was that some of these are touched upon in the high quality waters assessment. But again, I'm not that intimately, I don't work with it intimately. And they also could be sort of more broadly included in the watershed eco rank. But again, I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that. Does anybody have a comment about that?
The macrophyte assessment of condition, biological condition, takes into factors that are like the plant species type, and the more sensitive the species in the water body, the more likely it is to get a higher score. And that is one of the criteria for the high quality waters assessment.
Drew has his hand up. Oh, I'm sorry, Pamela. I thought you better.
So again, there's a little bit of duplication there, but I can see where that's listing a water body by type. The plant community information could be useful, like at a within lake scale, if you wanted to get to that level of detail. I'm kind of thinking out loud, but the short answer is it was considered in the high quality waters rankings.
And then is this data available for most of the lakes or a limited set of the lakes in the county?
It would only be for the ones that have actually done point intercept surveys.
Right.
Yeah. So not every lake has had that done.
Does Joe have his hand up?
Yeah, Joe has his hand up.
I was waiting. I didn't want to interrupt anyone. Sorry.
Thank you for being patient.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think we have to consider invasive species in this ranking because the Minocqua chain in particular, at least from my perspective, is affected every day. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on Minocqua, Quagga, Tomahawk, right? So if we're looking at your 5-10-year plan and how other lake districts and other lake associations can use this information to protect the lakes, we have to consider invasive species because it's changing every day. And I mean, just talking with Stephanie this summer, I mean, there's so many things close by to us that are on their way, if not already being introduced to our waters, right? So not factoring in the invasive species in some way, and I'm not saying it has to be its own category, but not using that as a metric of how you would like people to approach protecting the lakes. Because that's sort of where I'm getting from all of this is like the plan for the long term is to give this information to lake districts and associations to use for their purposes to help protect those lakes, correct? So the invasive species is a huge part of that, and that's a lot of what we're managing on Mid Lake and on Tomahawk and Quagga and Minocqua, just on our local chain where I am. So I think we have to consider that, or I think it should be considered at least, if not a separate category, at least incorporated in some way into another category. And maybe that's where the high quality water index comes in. And but even being on that list, Mid Lake's on that list, we still have invasive species. It might not be Rasian milfoil, which is a very common one on our chain, but we have purple loosestrife, we have the lilies. I mean, those are all invasive species we have to consider when we're managing the lake. So
yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Drew, for that. And Scott?
I was just gonna say a couple other things that might be kind of captured in other factors. Like I agree with Sandy and Dan. I mean, if you have large water level fluctuations, that's a unique thing that happens on certain types of lakes. I think that largely is captured by lake type. Like seepage lakes will far and away see the highest water level changes from high to low. But it is a good thing to think about. And like Pamela mentioned for the aquatic plant metrics, like the trophic state, it's not perfectly tied to whether the lake meets water quality standards, but it is probably pretty strongly correlated. So like in the healthy waters list, if lakes are meeting the state water quality standards, they're more likely to be oligotrophic or mesotrophic lakes as opposed to eutrophic or hypereutrophic. I'm just pointing those out as you know, there may be a little overlap between between some of the categories. That's all.
Yeah. Then we got Michelle.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the invasive species comment that Joe brought up. I think it's really important and it's a big deal. I just want to ask the group, how do we capture it? If we're looking at our most vulnerable lakes to our least vulnerable lakes, and we're putting them into these lake classifications, and we're coming up with protection activities. And okay, a lake has Eurasian water milfoil, purple loosestrife, and curly leaf pondweed, for example. What are we looking at? Is that a more vulnerable lake? I mean, we're not looking to class lakes by how much effort we're putting into a particular avenue, or I'm just wondering how do we get at this? I mean, is by saying we have a lake that has 4 invasive species is like, okay, that's not vulnerable anymore. It's just we're not going to worry about it with invasive species. But the group is worrying about it with invasive species.
Right.
Or we look at the lakes. I mean, when we're looking at protection activities, we're almost looking at those lakes that have little to no invasive species.
Right.
That we're looking when we're looking at healthy lakes and healthy watersheds or high quality, we're focusing on those lakes that don't have as many invasive species. So I agree, invasive species are a part of this, but as a group, how do we capture that, and what are we capturing it for, so to speak?
Well, I have a thought on that. So we have the 2 different plans. We've got the lakes that are in the containment category, and then the lakes that are in the shielding category as far as AIS. So containment would be those lakes with an NR40 invasive species on them that are also big lakes, very busy recreational lakes that have busy boat landings. And then we've got the shielding lakes that are uninfested waters within a certain radius that tends to get the watercrafts coming from those other lakes that are in the containment category. I mean, so we can maybe make a category, something like that, and that's very easy to do, but where is that going to get us? I mean, is that just something we want to consider just for a management part, as what you were saying? But I mean, that's easy enough for me to capture that data.
Yeah, I think I like that. That is an easy capture, and I think it's certainly a different way that we look at the lakes. On a continuum, though, how does the group how do we place those lakes? It's like, okay, the lakes that are on the shielding, are those vulnerable lakes?
Yes. Yes,
I would
they
say yes.
would be very vulnerable.
And the containment lakes are on the other end of the continuum, the other end of the spectrum.
Right, but they could also be a lake that's also on the healthy lakes list too. You know?
Well, so that's why, considering all these factors, we come up with a score. So it's going to be like give and take.
Yeah.
Nothing's black and white.
And then with the AIS, it could change overnight as well.
Right, right. Well, that's a point. Yeah, because if you find zebra mussel somewhere, then, yeah. But we can't, there's no way we can plan for that or foresee. Yeah.
Scott, do you have any thoughts on that?
And Dan also has his hand raised.
I can start, I guess. I think, I mean, it's pretty clear that a protection tool about invasive species will revolve around AIS prevention. And like Stephanie said, I mean, you could take lakes that don't have invasive species yet, and you'd want to shield them. You can take lakes that have many invasive species or a high abundance of any given one, and you'd want to contain it in those lakes. I think so it just seems like all the lakes could be a priority for AIS prevention, and that's just a good protection tool, and we all recognize that. Maybe one way, like we talked about, number of boat landings earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that may be a way, if we're specifically thinking about aquatic invasive species prevention, to figure
Mhm.
out which lakes are higher. It's a higher priority to either contain in or shield from. So like if a lake needs shielding and it has a bunch of boat landings on it, that's higher priority than a lake that needs shielding, but it has one carrying access. Or and the same with containment lakes. So I think you could think about, you know, using the number of boat landings or amount of access to a lake in a way to think
Mhm.
about AIS prevention.
Mhm.
And, you know, in our grant guidance, we have but it's like the top 300 AIS prevention lakes in the state list. And they kind of used a variety of factors there. I think it's the number of boat landings, whether the lakes are suitable for whether like the different invasive species are likely to survive in those lakes. And then I think they might have used like how many actual invasive species are in the lake as well. I'd have to ask somebody for like how they came up with that list, but yeah.
I was looking at that this morning.
So I guess those are off the top of my head, those are my thoughts, and maybe Pamela's posting that prevention list right now. So kind of looking at what DNR did to prioritize where to prevent invasive species movement might be a good place to start. I don't know that Pamela and I are experts in that, but I could dig up whoever developed that list, like exactly what their criteria were.
Yet the risk, I mean, it's good to consider AIS for sure. There is a risk that you don't want it to dominate this project. We even changed the lake classification ranking for counties and took out references to AIS because there's so much funding, there's so much staff, existing programs already dedicated to it. But in the context of like the science of protecting lakes, it makes sense. But it's a delicate balance because AIS can sometimes dominate and you lose sight of the bigger habitat and water quality protection aspects.
And
Yeah, Pamela, I would agree. Yeah, I agree with you on that. That's kind of where I was going with it. And I know when Joanna and I had talked earlier about AIS, is how are we capturing it? Is it captured in something else? And we went right where you were at, Scott, to the boat landings. You know, for pressure. And certainly we can go back and with Joe's comment, probably pick up with those protection activities that as BMPs or management practices there, you know, not so much maybe a 1, 2, 3 score type of thing with how much AIS, but you know, incorporating it, but just how do we incorporate it?
Right.
Yeah, and I was just going to echo what Michelle and Pamela said. I wouldn't want it to dominate. I think it's probably universally recognized that prevention is a good tool to stop the movement. And Mike Engelson, one last thing, Mike Engelson brought up earlier with the boat landings. I mean, it's not just how many boat landings, but it's how many boats are on a lake. Like the only place we don't find aquatic invasive species is where there are no boats on the lakes. I mean, like in the middle of the national forest and no one gets on those lakes. If it's a lake without public access, but there's people living on that lake, those lakes have invasives too. Like I mean, it's somewhat about how much access, but once enough people are using a lake, whether it's public or private, you find invasives. So it's hard, but prevention's the good key step, I think.
Yeah.
I think another fact, if I can make an interjection, I think another factor that you need to think about is who is going to use this lake classification? Is this internally for just the conservation office to use? Is it for the general public to have access to? Because you're going to have different people in different walks of life who may want to access this kind of information when it becomes public knowledge. So you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah. It is intended to be used by the public and lakes groups, other counties, you know, as guidelines.
Good. Dan has his hand up too.
I'm gonna address Jim Winkler's comment first, which the invasive species information is already available if you know where to look for it for each individual lake. But if we're talking about a lake classification to identify vulnerable lakes, and to me that's the key, is vulnerable lakes, and I don't want this to be all about AIS. I mean, for God's sakes, I eat, live, and breathe Eurasian water milfoil on Squash Lake every damn day, and I don't need it to be more, of the same. But I think if we're talking about strategies to protect vulnerable lakes, then certainly the ones that don't have AIS are vulnerable.
Yes.
It may sound easy enough for me to say that we should give them a better score just because they don't have it, but that just means they're more vulnerable than the ones that do have it. I'm sorry. And I'm speaking from somebody who has property on a lake that has. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different invasive species. Only one that can be actively managed, which is milfoil. But so that's my feeling, and I'd like to hear what Joe has to say about that as well, because it's not so much about, gee, we already have it, what do we do now? We already know what to do now. But it's, what do we do for those lakes that don't have it?
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for that. Anybody else?
Well, I'm just gonna go on to the last slide, and we can always go back to any of the topics. But I just wanted to send out a big thank you to everyone here today. It's really important that we get feedback from all these different backgrounds. Can't do it alone, and we really appreciate it. We wanted to talk a little bit about the coming meetings. So in the next meetings, we'll actually, I hope to come up with a vulnerability score for the lakes in the county. And then we would talk about, what classes we would divide them into, and then appropriate protection activities or management practices for each. So I think we were thinking the next meeting will definitely be in the new year after the holidays. Michelle, did you have something you wanted to add about that?
No, I think at this point, I think we were looking at after the first of the year, since we're coming into the holiday season, and Joanne's got some work ahead of her, which is kind of taking together what we talked about today, maybe sending it onwards and, incorporating and doing some of the background work. So when we come together next time, we have those classes, those ranges, not the classes, but the features that we talked about today. Some of the ranges, how things might look. And then next meeting, take a look at what type of classes are we having, 3, 5, whatever it may be, and then start working from that point. So, but we can send out a poll. We'll send out a doodle poll coming up here. But if anybody feels strongly against starting up after the holidays, now's your time to speak up. But that's kind of what we were thinking about for schedule here.
Yeah.
And I think I don't see any hands. And I did have a public comment section down here on the meeting. I didn't know if we were going to have individuals that maybe weren't right on to the team, and anybody was welcome to join in. So I'll take we're happy to take comment any last minute thoughts, suggestions, guidance would be greatly appreciated from whoever is on the call at this time.
Maybe we could convince the DNR to use the classification as a grant ranking tool.
Hmm.
Well, I think you may get more points for it if you incorporate the classification into your land and water management plan and reference that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everybody.
As noted. Okay, I don't have anything from my end. Joanne, any last parting words, or Bearbell?
Just, I think this has been an amazing meeting. It's really inspiring.
Absolutely.
Joanne, this is
Yes.
Debbie. I
Hi,
just want to
Debbie.
thank you for all of your efforts in making that PowerPoint and digging up all the data and putting that together today for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to add, I know we had a lot of ideas and suggestions, and you're going to have to go through and sift through that and decide and figure they're doable.
Right.
That's not up to us, I don't think. So I thank you for the work you're going to have to do after this meeting.
I like to be busy.
That's a benefit.
Yes, yes. I like to come to work and have a lot to do, so that makes me happy. And it's definitely important work, so thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for the time, and we'll be in touch soon. We'll try to give a recap and get a poll out to when we're looking for our next dates. But I think with that, I think we'll end the time since it's flown by. And thank you once again for being here and commenting and putting ideas forth for the project.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Yeah. Michelle, Joanne, do
Bye-bye.
we want to stay on for a moment, or you feel done?
Sure, I
Hey,
can
what-
stay on for a recap, and yeah.
I just wanted to point out that I left you one comment about which lakes were ORW waters, but not on the healthy waters list. It's not
Okay.
the ORW list isn't that long, so there's just the 3 lakes
Yeah.
if you want to look in the comments there.
Yeah, okay,
Oh.
thank you.
Perfect. I see that, Scott. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
be
thanks for
poring
pulling
over
this
this.
together. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thanks,
you
Scott.
too.
Thanks for your input. Take care.
So I just want to say thank you to all of you folks. You did a very good job. And thank you for pulling all this information together. I look forward to your final or your report to come.
Yes.
So it's a work in progress, but thanks a
Yes.
lot.
But thanks for being here, Jim, and for piping in. So really appreciate that
Yeah,
support.
I filled in for the other county board supervisor.
Yes.
We thank you so
All right.
much.
Yeah, take care, guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Okay, you too. Bye, Jim.
And I want to say thank you, Bearbell. You
Let's stop
do
the
such a-
recording.
Oh, yes. Okay. Is it?
Hold on.
Oh.